Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Simple Living Happy Home. I am sitting quite comfortably in our guest room right now because I wanted to talk through the basics on how to start a small business for those of you who might be looking at doing that in the near future. What qualifies me to talk through this process and what's involved with it? As of the beginning of this year, my husband and I became small business owners. We actually started our own small business. We have an LLC, which is a limited liability company called Good Neighbors Homestead. And we began, like I said, at the beginning of this year, going through the whole process. I've been looking into doing like a homestead business now for probably at least a year or more. And so the beginning of this year just happened to be when we decided to start that process. So what did that look like for us? Well, if you want to start a small business, the first thing that you have to decide is what is your passion, or what are you going to be selling? Okay, so are you going to be selling goods, like actual products, or are you going to be selling services? Now that sounds a little off-putting, but basically the services can be organizing skills. If you are really good at organizing spaces and helping declutter, you can create a small business for you to be a personal organizer. You have a lot of options as far as what can be included in goods or services, but ultimately, because of the amount of work that has to go into creating your own business, you really need to be passionate about it, and you really need to enjoy what you're doing. So for our small business, we do baked goods and knitted items, craft items, DIYs, wall hangings, that sort of thing. So my husband has probably spent about 4 or 5 years really kind of learning more about baking and pastry and sourdough and all of that sort of stuff. So it's been a long process for him to really get to the point where we kind of looked at what he was making and went, people would pay for this. This is really good. And I have been knitting since I was in high school, and have just been recently kind of expanding the different types of things that I'm knitting, and have looked at a lot of the stuff I've been knitting, and have gone to a lot of craft shows and saw that, hey, people are actually selling knitted items. They're selling hats, they're selling socks, they're selling mittens, that sort of stuff. And so, finding a couple of the things that I felt were unique, but also I could knit really well, because you don't want to try to sell something that isn't high quality. You're going to be selling things for a little bit more expensive because it takes you more time, and it's more expensive for you to typically make those things versus what gets made and sold in retail stores. But there's a lot of people out there who appreciate the handmade and the small batch bakery items and that sort of stuff without the preservatives and things that are really handmade, and you can actually talk to the person who made it. People really appreciate that backstory and that information. So you really want to make sure that you're giving them a good, high quality product. Once you've figured out what you want to sell, then you need to start working on your business plan. Now, your business plan doesn't need to be super formal and professional unless you are going to be requesting a business loan from a bank. What I would recommend, and what my husband and I did, is we actually loaned ourselves the money to kind of get things started up with our small business. So we budgeted out of our personal funds to get an extra stand mixer, to get the extra baking paraphernalia that my husband would need, extra yarn that I was going to need to kind of get things started. And what that means is then we don't have anybody else that we are having to pay back. It was a personal grant that we gave to ourselves, that we were going to try this. These are supplies and items that we would be using for personal use, or could use for personal use if the business didn't end up going well and working out. So we opted to just kind of grant ourselves that money, and it's been really nice because we didn't have to actually apply for a loan or anything like that. We do have a business plan, but it is very informal. It's very vague in a lot of ways because it didn't need to be super specific, and there were details about this process and things that I wasn't even sure what it was going to look like or how it was going to go. The next thing you want to look at is the state requirements on what business type you are looking at creating. We are an LLC, a limited liability company. There is a fee for creating that because you are basically owning the name of the business, and no one else is allowed to use that name. And you find that out when you're going to apply for the LLC license. But basically, what it does is it creates a barrier between you personally and your personal assets and the business, and what goes on within the business. So that way, if there were to be any sorts of issues with lawsuit, complaints, any type of thing like that, there is some protection for you personally and for your personal assets. Along with that, it's always good to have business insurance, because there's some interesting ways that people want to try to come after small businesses and small business owners. And so having the licensing and having the insurance, again, provides a safeguard and a barrier between you personally and your personal assets and the business assets and what the business is responsible for if anything were to. Then you need to start really looking at the market for whatever it is that you're going to be selling, your service or your goods. And so who are you going to be marketing to? What type of people is this going to be marketed towards? This becomes really important, especially based on the area that you live, and you want to kind of think about what's the economic status of the people that you're going to be trying to cater to. Are you going to be, trying to sell, let's say, large artwork, large wall hangings that you're going to want to be able to sell for, a couple $100s a piece? You got to make sure you are in an area where you have access to individuals who have that kind of expendable income that they can pay a couple $100s for a piece of art for their wall. How are you going to reach your target market then? Are you going to be advertising? In what way? Are you going to be advertising online? Are you going to have a website? Are you going to have flyers posted around? Are you going to be banking on word of mouth? How are you going to reach your target market? Are you going to be doing a farmer's market? Are you going to be doing a craft fair? All those sorts of things are things that you need to consider when it comes to what is your market, and then how are you going to reach those individuals? How are you going to let them know that you are able to sell them these goods or services? And then where are you going to be selling? Are you going to be selling strictly online, or are you going to be selling at a farmer's market or craft fairs, or are you going to actually have a brick and mortar building? All of those things become really important when you're talking about the market of people that you're trying to access. So let's say, for instance, like I said, you want to sell large artwork that you want to sell for a couple $100s a piece, but the area that you live is mainly individuals that are lower to middle income. It wouldn't necessarily make any sense for you to have a brick and mortar building, because the individuals that are physically in the area that would be able to come into your studio aren't going to be able to necessarily afford the artwork that you're selling. Once you figure out how you want to advertise and market, now it comes down to the cost. What can you afford to do? There's a lot of different price points for advertising in various places. And so when you're starting out with a small business, you want to give it the best opportunity it can, but you don't want to sink so much money into the marketing that you really end up costing yourself more money than what you would see as far as a profit back from your product or your service. The other thing you want to keep in mind is the anticipated work demands. How much time and how much physical labor is this business venture of yours going to cost you? For my husband doing the baking, again, that's a lot of physical work. And so we have been able to use some of the profits from the farmers market sales then and turned around and invested it back into the business by buying things that take out some of that physical labor for him, to allow him to not only be able to sustain the workload that he's doing, but also be able to increase production. Is the amount of hours that it's going to take. So for instance, my husband and I both work full-time jobs. Our small business is our side hustle, basically. And so what we had to figure out then is, what can we feasibly fit into the week? How many hours do we have spare that we can put towards this small business? And so that's where kind of planning out our weeks, figuring out how much time do we need for each particular task, and all of that sort of stuff really has come into play. So having some sort of a schedule as well of what a week would look like in relation to your small business can be very helpful. Not necessary, but very helpful. Is sourcing your materials. So if you're offering services, sourcing your materials might look like, let's say you are looking at becoming an event planner. Sourcing your materials would be having access or contact information for DJs and bands that you can call upon to provide music for the events that you would be helping to plan, or different caterers that you can work with. Those that are making physical goods, it would be the ingredients for your baked goods. It would be the yarn for my knitted items, the wood for making wood crafts, any of the other supplies that you would need, paint in order to complete artwork and paintings and that sort of thing. So figuring out where you can source your materials. This is usually going to require a decent amount of research, because from a business standpoint, you want to get good quality materials and ingredients at as reasonable price as possible. And so that's where, especially from the baking side, that's where buying in bulk, so buying 40 or 50 pound bags of flour, comes in handy. One, because you're going to use it, but two, because you're going to get it at a cheaper price when you buy it in larger quantities. So then you aren't having to increase your prices in order to just break even on your product. Business space is another item that you want to think about. So this can be an actual office where if you're providing some sort of a service where you need to do video calls with individuals, with clients, you have a business space that you can be in without being disturbed, that looks professional, all of that sort of stuff. That can be a business space. Business space for us is our kitchen. And that's where we do the vast majority of it. So when it comes to the business space, you don't have to have a physical office. You can just use a space in your home. Now, if you want to be able to write that space and the use of the electricity and various other things off as business expenses on your taxes, now that's going to get a little bit trickier, because you have to designate that that is only being used for business purposes. When we first started with the farmers market this year, we had these giant plastic tubs full of flour that sat in our kitchen for the longest time. And I finally got tired of having them there, because it just made it difficult and cumbersome to use our table, and even to access the bins of flour was just a challenge. So we put it up another shelf in our entryway closet space, and that has become our farmers market business closet. It's got all of our packing supplies. It has all of the egg cartons for our eggs that we sell. It has all of our bulk ingredients, all of the tubs of flour. Everything is in that closet space. Now, it's not just business items that are in the closet. We have our recycling bins. We have a vacuum cleaner. There are other things in there that are not related to the business. So we are not able to write off that closet space as a business expense. But we did make a point to designate that area as a basic storage area for the items required for the business. So that way, at least we can function a little bit more seamlessly. The last point I want to make is about how to succeed with your business. And there is really one of three ways that a business can be competitive. It's either with the price, the value, or the quality. Okay? So let's break that down a little bit. So price is pretty straightforward. Okay? If someone is competitive in their pricing, it means that they undercut their competitors a little bit, so you're not having to spend as much. That's pretty straightforward. Okay? The value, okay, is how much is the customer getting for what they're spending. Okay? And then the quality is obvious. What is the quality of the item that they are getting from the money they're spending? Okay. So for a small business especially, one of the easiest ways to develop a customer base and to really develop a positive impression around your name and your business is high quality. That is completely within the control of the business owner to maintain a high quality product. One of the things where a small business can outperform a larger retailer any day of the week, because when you're doing things on a smaller scale, it's easier to maintain an excellent quality level of your product. Now, the other two, you may not, as a small business, you may not be able to compete with the larger retail companies on value and cost, but you can use those to compete with other small businesses. Okay, so to recap, all right, how to start your small business. First, you got to decide what you're going to sell. Then you want to write up a business plan, even just like a rough business plan, just to help you have some direction on the next steps going forward. Then you want to start looking at what is the market of people that you're going to be selling to, individuals, your income, your socioeconomic status in your area, wherever you're going to be selling. Then you want to look at your state requirements for your licensing, what insurance do you need, all of that sort of stuff. Then start checking into what marketing you would be looking at needing to do or wanting to do, and the cost of all of that. How much would you actually need to get up and running, and everything from your initial supplies of packaging, if you're selling an actual product, or even just the office supplies of a printer, a laminator, a shredder, whatever items you would end up needing. Start to get an idea of how many hours a week this is going to be taking of your time. If you already work a full-time job and it turns out that this small business is now going to be another full-time job, is that something you're going to want to take on before you start investing any money? You're going to have to make that decision. Then you're going to need to start figuring out where you're going to source all of your materials, or your supplies, and that can be contact information, that can be ingredients if you're baking and selling things like that, food items, that sort of stuff. And then figure out your space. Where are you going to run and operate your business from? Is it going to be somewhere in your home? Do you need and want to have a special separate business space that you could then write off for tax purposes? Those are all questions that you have to decide for yourself and to think about, because if you can plan out some of this stuff ahead of time and start looking forward at things, you can end up saving yourself a lot of headache, a lot of misery, a lot of time by anticipating some of these things and going through things step by step. So I hope this helps others out there that are in the same place that I was a couple years ago. So thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.